Oh, morning freaks, we are almost there. Hold on, let me reload the page. Damn it. Damn it. One more subscriber. Come on. Now today we're going to talk about nutrition. I was going to talk about that on Sunday, but then I lost my voice. So today we're going to talk about nutrition, the stupid stuff that people say about nutrition, the things that you should do around your training, before your training, after your training, all that stuff we're going to break down today in 10 minutes. Because I don't know about you, but unless it's a cheap gel like this that costs $2 on special at Woolies, I hate spending money on expensive gels and crap like that. It just seems like the biggest waste of money. I'm going to show you people who are cheap like me, or poor, or both, how to save all of your cash so that you can spend more money on other things like camera gear and ASIC Super Blast 2s. Yeah. But I want you guys to let me know in the comments below what your nutrition protocol is, what you have before runs and during runs and after runs. Just let me know everything. Well, before we get too far into the weeds with this kind of stuff, we're going to first talk a little bit about physiology and biology and that kind of stuff. Essentially, we're going to understand what we eat and where it goes and what it's actually used for when we're doing running. Okay, so generally speaking, we eat food and it's broken down into carbs, fats, proteins, and they get stored in different areas of the body. Carbohydrates are mostly stored in the liver and the muscles themselves in what we call glycogen storage. This means that it can be utilized very fast because the storage center is right next to the movement center, if that makes sense. Now, fats get stored directly into body fat, and a tiny little bit can get stored into the fatty droplet of every cell in your body, but that is very, very small. Most of it is going straight to the fat stores. And proteins basically create every single different molecule, whatever, in the body, and so they just get stored in everything, essentially. Now, the next thing that we have to understand is the energy utilization during exercise. So what tends to happen is that at lower intensities, fat tends to take over in providing the most amount of energy for this low intensity exercise. And as you get faster, carbs start to ramp up until they are the sole contributor to actual energy production. Now, here's the thing. What you actually burn doesn't actually correlate to what you actually eat. By eating less carbohydrates, you're not necessarily going to burn less carbohydrates and burn more fat. That is not how it works. It's the intensity that controls what is actually getting utilized. Now, as you can see by that graph right here, the blue line, there is actually some carbohydrate contribution to energy production during lower intensity exercises. And we're going to explain a lot more about why that happens a little bit later in the video. But first, let's talk about how you can actually fuel your workouts. Because the thing is, all you really need to do is put some of this in a bottle, okay? And rather than doing your out and backs while you're carrying your gels and your, 5 liters of water hydration pack, just do loops, okay? Come back to an area and get your bottle and have a drink, right? And you can get the same amount of nutritional benefit from 30 cents of sugar from this thing right here than you would from an actual gel that costs $6. What would you rather spend? 30 cents? $6. 30 cents? $6. I would rather spend 30 cents, actually. I don't know about you, but yeah. And the thing is, the scamming doesn't stop there, because I've seen those pre-run beta fuel sachets and stuff, and they cost $6 as well. And once again, you're not getting a great amount of carbohydrates from that. It's around 60 cents worth of sugar from the same thing. And the thing is all the science that's coming out now is showing that this 1-to-1 glucose to fructose is actually just as beneficial as the maltodextrin and the 3-to-1 formulas and all that rubbish and the hydrogels. It really does not matter. What really matters to me, okay, if they're all the same, is which is the cheapest, you know? And because this stuff is so expensive, I feel like people are gonna be more likely to underfuel because they don't wanna spend $35 on one of their 30K long runs, rather than just putting some sugar in a bottle like this and making sure that they're fully glycogen stored to the max. Because the thing is not having fully saturated glycogen stores is a recipe for disaster. It causes so many issues with running. And it's a pretty strong determinant to chronic fatigue related conditions like red S. You've heard of red S before. It's a horrible condition where people have just been depleted for so long that eventually they're just a bit destroyed. So let's not do that, okay? Now, this is how you're going to be able to start cranking out the carbohydrates during all of your runs, okay? Any runs, this is my general rule, any runs that are longer than 1 hour, I would start to actually fuel for, because, you know, you would get in your first hour of carbohydrates during your breakfast, and then you would start to deplete them after a certain amount of time. So we want to start to top them up to make sure that we're not finishing our run so depleted that our recovery is going to take a little bit longer than we really want it to. And, you know, it's just pointless basically when it costs 30 cents, just a little bit of preparation beforehand, 30 cents, some water, and you're done. Because you don't want any prizes from having chronically depleted glycogen stores, and it's so easy, okay? Even at low intensities, if you're one of these zone 2 runners where you're running zone 2 quite a lot, you're still going to deplete your glycogen stores, and that is because of the physiology behind fat burning. Now, this is not talked about basically at all on YouTube, so not many people actually understand this. But during the initial stage of the citric acid cycle, look it up on Google if you want to see something really cool, you need to convert oxaloacetate into citrate, okay? And you use pyruvate from glycolysis to create that thing, okay? Without oxaloacetate, you can't actually kickstart the citric acid cycle to burn fat, okay? Oxaloacetate comes from breaking down carbohydrates, and that's why even at lower intensities, like if you look at people that are in Ironmans, they're in their aerobic zone the entire time where they're predominantly burning fat, but they have to supplement their carbohydrates because to burn the fat, you need to have some carbohydrates in there. Otherwise, you're gonna get fully depleted and bonk yourself, okay? And when it's this easy to ensure that you don't deplete your glycogen stores, there is no excuse for bonking on runs. Not when it costs $3 per week to fuel all of your runs. You could do it on $3 per week of just this and also something else. And that something else is obviously electrolytes, okay? We're not gonna get into how to calculate how many electrolytes that you need per hour because it's a bit of a mess, and I've made videos about that in the past. What I'll do is I'll link the video on how I produced my own formula for my own electrolytes in the description below, and then you guys can go watch that. But essentially for me, it's around 1 and a bit scoops of this per hour in a bottle with around 800 milliliters of water. That is my formula, and then I can add in my sugar per hour, which is going to be around 60 grams, and that's if I'm going quite slow, okay? Now, prepare for the ADHD DIY method of doing this. Okay, let's do it. So step 1 is the journaling process. So what you're going to do after every run that you fuel on, you're going to write down what you took in terms of grams of carbs for that particular hour, say for example, and then you're going to write down how you felt and what intensity you were actually at. So you could do intensity or you could do pace, you could do whatever as long as it's relative. And what you'll start to see is that you'll have runs where, you know, you're in the red zone where you felt like shit, so you put that on the graph as like a little red dot at that certain grams per hour and intensity, and then next time you do a run similar to that, you'll bump it up a bit more and maybe you'll be back in the green zone or the, you know, blue zone for this graph. And what you'll start to be able to do is find the lower end of what you're supposed to be taking at particular intensity zones, and then you'll be able to start to plot in a very accurate graph as to what you actually need per hour. And then if you have enough data, you should be able to actually estimate before you go on your run the night before when you're creating your bottles, how much you're actually going to need. And then it means that you're going to be more accurate rather than less accurate. And that's always better. Now, what you can do now as step 2 is do the exact same thing, but with electrolyte formulas. I'm going to skip this because I've already done it in another video, but that is what you would do. And then you should be able to start to create particular formulas that work exactly for you. You could look up, the workout that you're going to be doing for that day and the temperature that it's going to be. And then you can start to go, okay, well, I'm probably going to need this much of electrolytes per hour in terms of sodium, and I'm going to need this many carbohydrates per hour. Chuck it in a bottle like this, and then you're going to be very close to being as accurate as possible. Okay, that's what it's all about. It's all about not blowing yourself up and bonking, because it takes your recovery time to the next level. You have to recover for way longer than you actually need, okay? This is my method of doing it. I've done this before in the past. I probably need to do this again because I've not really done much crazy workouts or anything like that in the last year or so, but that's how you can start to do it. What I would say is that, if you're doing specific workouts for a race that's coming up and you're planning on using gels just for the race, you probably need to have an adjustment period during that time, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, where you can really try and fuel as best as you can on gels and things like that, if that's what you're planning on using in the race. And that's the end of the video. Hopefully this helps you get a better understanding of fueling, and that you need to really focus on getting the right amount of fuel. And if you overfuel, that is better than underfueling for sure, because your recovery time is still going to be just as good. You might just need to poo yourself or poo behind a bush, but that's okay, because the workout's still going to be gold. I'll see you guys later. Bye.